David Eby, he knew exactly what he's doing. He's a lawyer. He's not stupid. Some people might want to call him stupid, but he knows exactly what he's doing. He's got very skilled bureaucrats telling him what he's supposed to do. I believe he's got a very clear agenda. Where I found that I really had to step forward and do that was when I actually went to a First Nations conference in Vancouver, and it was 1 week before I did that bill, and it was with First Nations and the current government. And I just sat there and listened the whole time. And one of the Grand Chiefs turned around and said that no land in British Columbia has been ceded over. And it's a major contradiction of the fact that we've got Treaty 8, which is my region. It's about 18% of the province.
Okay.
That land was ceded over to the Crown. And if this Grand Chief is turning around and saying otherwise, they have intention behind it. This is going to start getting very out of hand.
Today, I have politician and MLA here in British Columbia, Jordan Kealy, coming on the show. It's way overdue for me to have the fabulous Jordan on. To remind you guys, he's MLA for Peace River North in Fort St. John. And I really wanted him to come on because he has been a fly on the wall to a lot that has been going on here in British Columbia to do with DRIPA, the forestry industry that's in crisis. You know, my show has not talked about the forestry industry, and I wanted to talk to Jordan about it because he's very versed in it. We're in big, big trouble. So I'm going to get his opinion on what he thinks David Eby is going to do about DRIPA, what he thinks about the Conservative Party of BC and where it's headed, because as most of you know, Jordan was with the Conservative Party of BC and he left to become independent because he did not like the direction it was going. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff happening, some that I don't even know about. So I'm so happy to have Jordan on to talk about the disaster of British Columbia and whether he thinks that BC can be turned around. I also want to ask him, is there a chance that the Conservative Party of BC, along with people like Jordan who are independents and One BC, could possibly come together to defeat David Eby while David is not very popular right now? I also want to talk to him about so many things. It looks like a bunch of the First Nations have come together and said to David Eby, you better not amend DRIPA. So he's got lobby groups from, I'll say, 3% of the population breathing down his neck. They have come out and said, yes, DRIPA is the way it's supposed to be. They want to own all this land. They want all the land to be theirs. They want all of our resources to be theirs. They've come out and said DRIPA is exactly what it's intended to be. We're going to talk about that. So happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Let's bring on our awesome guest. Hi, Jordan.
Thank you very much for having me, Odessa.
So tell me about where you're at. You are a farmer, is that correct? And you became an MLA. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
I'm a farmer and mechanic. I'm a millwright by trade. I've got my welding ticket as well, and then I do some machining. So before becoming a politician 5 years ago, I never would have thought that I'd ever be a politician. I was very happy on my farm. I was kind of prepping for how things were going, and I didn't expect for what happened in our healthcare system that I lost my father in the healthcare system, and he ended up choosing MAID. And it really opened my eyes as to how bad our system is.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when that happened to him, I was on the farm, and I wasn't vaccinated at the time. When I went to go and see him when he was dying in the hospital, I couldn't even get into the hospital. I was down in the parking lot, and my family was up there with him when he decided to choose MAID and he was dying. And that created like a nuclear bomb of hatred inside of me for the system that we have. And we're seeing this system collapse in so many different ways that it's not just healthcare, it's drugs, crime. We're seeing title upon title with First Nations. It really is imploding at it. And it seems like the NDP is just welcoming it, that they've had plenty of time to try and fix it, and it's just not happening. And I decided to try and do something about it in a different way than most people, and I got involved in local politics, and I was a regional director for the Peace region for 2 years, and then I actually I didn't want to become an MLA because I hate party politics. I got convinced by John and a couple other people that their candidates and MLAs would represent their ridings first and foremost before the party. And call me a sucker, but I believed him. And that he said that he wasn't going to whip his MLAs. And it was interesting that for the first 9 months that I was campaigning, we had a lot of very strong conservative candidates. And it looked like the cohesion was there, that you probably wouldn't have to whip those candidates to have them come to a consensus on a lot of things. And then BC United imploded and they brought a huge amount of MLAs over, kicked candidates out. And then we found that the caucus that was formed once we were elected was pretty much 24 liberals to 20 conservatives within the caucus.
Right.
And it was such a battle between the two different sides within the party, and this is just something that John welcomed to happen, even though so many people had major concerns about this, that we thought this was going to be a strong conservative party to try and turn the tides of what's happening. And I really believe that's what people voted for when they saw a conservative platform.
Yep.
They wanted major change. They didn't want a liberal platform. They wanted strong people to step forward and make major bold changes, and that's what I believed. And when John pretty much lied to everybody and proceeded to, well, he did several things wrong. One of them was the AGM that was very corrupt in the way that he ran it, and then the other one was that when he kicked out Dallas Brody, um, he said that he wasn't going to whip MLA, and that was a form of whipping that took it to an extreme. That when in the House, if we have a vote and it's 47 to 46, and we're one vote off from being able to actually beat the NDP, uh, by by John kicking out that one MLA, you create an erratic vote.
Yeah.
And I confronted his leadership and his executive team as to how this party is going to work. It's not going to work in a balanced manner the way that he's described it. It is just chaos within the conservative caucus, and a lot of people don't actually see that chaos. They just see the surface of everything. And when
Mhm.
I confronted John as to how this was going to work, I really realized how much of a weak leader he was. So I at that point, I saw that the Liberals were in control of the caucus, and I had a choice to make, that I either get backbenched in the party and silenced, or I wait my turn to get kicked out of the party, or I choose to leave. And there were several people that were thinking about leaving. And then Tara Armstrong was another person that decided to leave with me at the same time. And my thought was that if John isn't going to be a strong leader, I can't rely on him for leading the province or my region in
Well,
any.
you were right. I mean, look what happened. He gets kicked out of being leader. Now he's
Yeah,
just an MLA. You and um, Dallas and Tara, you guys are just ahead by a year. Just like my show is always ahead by 2 years. So I look like a wingnut and then everything comes true. And so I'm constantly getting bullets just like you guys. And things just come true. Now, I am gonna make a comment about 1BC. I haven't made a comment publicly about it. I've had a lot of phone calls behind the scenes, and, Dallas Brody happens to be the MLA in my riding. There's so many weird coincidences in my life. I will be voting for her again in my riding, whether she's 1BC or called something else or an independent, I will be voting for Dallas, and you are in a completely different riding way up north.
yeah,
And I know you and Dallas are quite friendly with each other. And, I guess you're probably happy you didn't join 1BC because of the drama that just happened. You're like, holy smokes, I got to stay out of that. But I know you're quite good friends, like in a way, with Dallas as well. And so now, if the Conservative Party of BC, by some crazy happening, actually votes a leader that you truly think is going to be conservative in the way of DRIPA, stop with the free fentanyl, instead open up more beds for people to get help. Um, SOGI, bringing it back a bit, making it more anti-bullying instead of confusing our 7-year-olds. Um, would you ever consider, and I'm not saying you should, but everybody wants to know, would you ever consider going back to the Conservative Party of BC if you thought it was the best way to beat the NDP?
I I honestly believe that a unified, strong right is the best way to beat the NDP, and that's why I joined the Conservative Party in the first place. Um, Now, how it plays out with the different leaders that they have in place, if they pick a Christy Clark, well, then there's no way in hell that I'm going to join that. Um, the Liberal Party, I'll be very straightforward. The Liberal Party, when they were here, they never did anything for my region. They always prioritized the swing votes in the lower mainland. And we got left out in the cold up in the north that they take all the money from our resources and spend them elsewhere, and we get nothing in return. So I think that right now, as an independent, I've stayed pretty drama free. That I've seen the Conservative Party pretty much fight amongst themselves and kick out their own leader and their 5 MLAs down. I was talking with one BC about, well, with Dallas and Tara about starting a party, and I chose not to rush into it. I wanted to focus on being able to do my job properly as an MLA. They chose to do the party, and I didn't want to rush into anything, and I saw some chances of drama coming, and that's why I chose to not get involved. And it was really disappointing to see the way that it played out, especially publicly with one BC. That's not something that we're, as MLAs, we're leaders of our constituents. Like, I represent 42,000 people. If I can't display true leadership and proper leadership and communication, um, I was just disappointed about how that played out. I get along with Tara really well too, and I was even trying to talk them into, like, how can they try and keep things together. Unfortunately, it broke apart on them, and I see that Dallas now has that party back under her name by herself. She won't have official party status by herself. You need a minimum 2 MLAs. Myself personally, I'm not in a rush to go anywhere. I'll stay an independent just like I have this whole time. I'm focused on bringing bills forward in the upcoming new year in February, and it should be interesting to see what happens then.
Mhm.
I think that we still have to keep the pressure on the NDP, especially when it comes to the way that the votes are happening and the way that most people think that if there's a way that the opposition can all vote together, that we stand a chance of beating the NDP. And the NDP have a majority, even without the two Greens. So that their votes, it was going 47-46, and the speaker was siding with them. So it's been very unfortunate to see a whole bunch of the bills that they push through that are very insidious in nature.
Yep.
And I've tried to spend quite a bit of time to do breakdowns of those bills on my Facebook page to explain to people in a very genuine, basic way to try and wake people up, because there's so many people that are just kind of stuck in their own little bubble in life, and they're trying to block everything out because it's things are so stressful nowadays, and it's not easy. We're all taxed to the point where we're almost breaking.
Yeah, they keep us so taxed that we don't have time to fight, and that seems to be what's going on in burnout, and even the activists from the last 5 years are getting burnt out.
Hmm.
That's what they say, an activist's life, being an activist is short, is, like a 5-year span, then you're like, "Okay, I've done my job."
Yeah.
So, now with now I have to say, in my opinion, you could disagree with me if you want, that the work of people like you, because you and Dallas, I believe, have been the most effective people, Tara as well, with what she's going and saying in the legislature. And, Ebby gives the theater of how dare you. What you guys have done, though, and a lot of people agree with me, Political analysts agree as well. Some of them, that what Dallas has done, and you are actually the first one to get up and say, we need to repeal DRIPA. Some of the stuff Tara's talked about as well. It's forced the Conservative Party of BC to go back to their roots because the exodus from Conservative Party of BC to One BC, or just people exiting the Conservative Party and waiting to see if they're going to vote independent or for One BC, and the creation of new landowners who never bothered to vote. What you guys have done may seem like, oh, we don't have a majority, so it's not making a difference anyway. Correct in the way that Ebby just pounces forward with his Marxism and destroying this province for the United Nations agenda of rebuilding it in a way that's not good for us. But you guys have made a difference. You forced the hands of the Conservative Party of BC to get rid of John. The people have spoken, donations dried up because the people that voted for John was based on what their website said, repealing DRIPA, changing SOGI to more of an anti-bullying program, getting rid of fentanyl. And, you got a bunch of rich landowners that put money into the Conservative Party BC to find that, like, why did John not the first week in create a bill like you did to repeal DRIPA? What the hell happened there?
I think that's the liberalism that really kicked in. That once they got in, they backed off their conservative platform, and they were really trying to capture more of the center. And I think that's a big fault that they're making, is that people really do want to see major change happen, and the Liberal Party will never deliver that. That that policy to repeal UNDRIP, that was something that right when I started campaigning, that was one of the core policies. It's been in place the whole time, and even up to the point that I did it, the Conservatives had over a year to be able to do it, even with the issues of talking about the land title upon title in Richmond. And where I found that I really had to step forward and do that was when I actually went to a First Nations conference in Vancouver. And it was 1 week before I did that bill. And it was with First Nations and the current government. And I just sat there and listened the whole time. And one of the Grand Chiefs turned around and said that no land in British Columbia has been ceded over. And it's a major contradiction of the fact that we've got Treaty 8, which is my region. It's about 18% of the province.
Okay.
That land was ceded over to the crown. And if this Grand Chief is turning around and saying otherwise, they have intention behind it, especially meaning that if they're going to start using the court system to really start to challenge the direction, whether or not it's through resources and minerals or whether or not it's title upon title, this is going to start getting very out of hand. And the reason that I did the repeal of DRIPA is because in order to actually make constitutional change, you have to have majority government or cabinet support in order to be able to make constitutional change. And I don't have that as an independent. And they're not going to give me the power to be able to do that. But to be able to repeal DRIPA, I didn't have to have that. And that's why I did that bill. And I had 2 minutes to speak to it. And I had the support of the full opposition.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to beat the NDP, but it's definitely getting to the point where this is going to cause so much division within our society, and this is going to go across Canada. It's happening in other British Commonwealth countries. It is not a good thing, and what's worse is that about 78% of the province is unceded territory. So even in my region where we've got Treaty 8 that has been ceded over, you've got Vancouver Island that's under a treaty, and then there's a couple others. There's still a huge amount of the province that doesn't have any treaties to cover the land. So that can leave a lot to the courts to be able to try and make decisions, especially if David Eby doesn't actually do something about this. And he is known when he rammed this through when the Lower Mainland had floods. He knew exactly what he's doing. He's a lawyer. He's not stupid.
Mhm.
Some people might want to call him stupid, but he knows exactly what he's doing. He's got very skilled bureaucrats telling him what he's supposed to do. I believe he's got a very clear agenda. This is not good overall as to how, when these challenges start happening, whether or not it's land or whether or not it's money, our province is almost broke. Our people are getting taxed like crazy. Canada has a high debt load. If we start seeing this happen to Canada, that we will see the point where it's either we go bankrupt or we will be put into a place where we are going to have the life sucked out of us financially to be able to try and pay for any of these settlements to go through. And it is not going to look good in any way, because in BC, we've got 204 First Nations, and it creates a level of bureaucracy that is going to see no end in
Yep.
fighting.
That's why there is just no alternative. DRIPA must be repealed, because even Aaliyah Warbus, who's a First Nation in Conservative Party of BC, has now done a 180 and said, uh-oh, we need to get rid of this. She sees the writing on the wall that, I mean, nobody wants to invest in BC. I don't know if you noticed that over the last week, Global News and all of them, they're now bringing on more First Nations to interview. They were bringing on like lawyers saying what a disaster this is. And it seemed like they realized what a disaster this is, but now they're bringing on First Nations, and they're actually coming out on the news and saying, "Yep, nope, David Eby better not amend anything." And this is exactly what DRIPA was meant to do. And so, yeah, like they just want all the land. And I'm sorry, but in 2026, saying that one group of people based on heritage from a long time ago can be the kings and overlords of all the land and all the resources is so undemocratic, is so actually un-Marxist and uncommunist. That's the interesting thing, is they're using communism and Marxism tactics to do this. But this is not a democratic society living with royal overlords. This takes us back. And chiefs, who are a lot of them male, there's a lot of misogyny that still goes on there. So it's like they don't even know what they believe in, the NDP. You're handing all these millions of dollars to a chief, unaccountable, unaudited, you know, we're bringing us back to what I think is the kingdoms in the 1800s. This is not fairness. This is not democracy. You're going to have one slave race of everybody, and then one group of 3% full Indigenous running everything because of the sins of our forefathers of hundreds of years ago. This is not the direction that a province can go in 2026.
And it's really sad to see the way that it's gone. And there is a clear intention as to why it's gone this direction. Is it's UNDRIP came from international. It was drafted internationally, brought in. These pieces of legislation were not meant for the best interest of our own country or province. We are a corporation of the Commonwealth still. Like when we actually vote in the House to pass a bill, it has to have royal assent in order for it to actually become law. I truly believe that it's at the point now where I think that Canada needs to separate from the Crown. And if First Nations have issues with the Crown, that they need to take those issues to the Crown directly. And we need to focus on Canadians and British Columbians. I think it's disgusting the amount of money that is spent outside of our country as well as within our own country, and there really isn't any accountability as to what's happening with that money, where it's going, who is actually getting it. There's a lot of people in the First Nations that don't get a cent.
Yep.
And then you see it go elsewhere. You see a huge amount of money go to lawyers and consultants. So you've got another level of bureaucracy within that own system that's not even part of our political structure. It's just gross. We need to come up with a different framework to be able to handle this, because I believe that when Douglas came and established treaties within British Columbia, and he was a governor of the crown. When he did that, he admitted that First Nations have a right to the land, and that contract treaty was drawn up with certain terms in it to cede that land over to the crown for the crown to use. Now, there are conditions that were in that, like with Treaty 8, there are things that had to get revised when came to census numbers or plows and cows. There's money paid forward. Those things were public knowledge of where the money was going. But then there's another side where you get Trudeau that promises clean drinking water. You see billions spent federally, and it doesn't actually happen. You've got accountability that doesn't really happen both ways. And I think when it comes to when they say reconciliation, reconciliation has to happen with the crown, with First Nations, not with us, the people.
Taxpayer, and that's what they're doing. The crown doesn't want to have to pay up, so they're making
Yeah.
us just not really own our land, sort of own our land. Maybe we're going to be taxed to the hills, a new tax. Yeah,
Well,
it's gross.
the part with that too is that when you're told that you need to reconcile, there's nothing for you to reconcile for. You didn't do anything wrong going back that far, and that they're putting us in a scenario where they're trying to entrap us into a level of guilt for something that we never did, when it's actually the federal government that it's their responsibility to deal with their issues
Mhm.
with the First Nations and even with the provincial government when it comes to certain things. That's where we've got major leadership issues. It's sickening that we've got these people in charge of running our province and our country. It's a giant mess, and I think it can get cleaned up. It's just got to get done in a very aggressive way, and I think people have to wake up and realize what's happening, because I think in the past year, the bills that they passed, they're not just regular bills that happen in the legislature. A lot of the bills that they've done, it gives them power in behind the scenes for bureaucrats to actually have a ton of power and make decisions on our behalf without even being in the House, where our elected representatives are supposed to be helping make these decisions.
Mhm.
And when they take that kind of power, move it out of the House, you're allowing these bureaucrats to make decisions for us that are not in our best interest in any way. And
No.
I think that when we have a change of government, we're going to have to clean house.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we are. Of all this overpaid, over-bloated bureaucracy that just makes them rich. Oh, lawyers are having a heyday right now. Okay, lastly, I'm gonna make one last comment on this DRIPA thing. I'll try to find the clip, but I did see it live. On Global News, they had somebody that's up, head of a bunch of First Nations groups say that investors should want to invest in BC. They should want to invest with the First Nations, and basically having a little tantrum like, why are you pulling out? You should be wanting to invest with us. You should, you should, you should. Well, the reason people aren't is because there's unaccountability, corruption, and literally they know that you can have the wool pulled from underneath you at any moment in time based on the mood, or a First Nations finding a bone or a tool somewhere that somebody may have used hundreds of years ago. I mean, reality check. Sorry, but people aren't going to invest knowing that at any moment with this Heritage Act, you can stall their investment for 5 years over a damn tool. Can we live in the present moment, please? And so they're now realizing they can't have their cake and eat it too. So he's having this tantrum like, how dare you not want to invest in us? Well, guys, look at what you're putting out there.
Yeah. And it's even at UBCM, all the municipalities spoke out about the Heritage Act possible
Yep.
changes.
Yeah, my audience knows I did a whole thing on the Heritage Conservation Act, actually.
Yeah, I ended up seeing the video that you did on that, and I think it turned out really well for describing things to people. That even with UBCM and a lot of the municipalities, there was a lot of red flags for what the government's doing with that and the proposed changes. And it's not good in any way, especially when you talk about investors. when you talk about investors coming in and they look at what they're investing into, and you've got risk of, say it's just a mine. It's one thing that you're looking at the mine itself and the resources that you're going to pull out and where you're shipping it to. That has risks. Then you end up adding in political risk of, say there's a conservative party in right now and you're dealing with them, but then the NDP get in, you evaluate that risk. Well, then you end up having to factor in 204 First Nations and overlapping risk of what can happen with that level of bureaucracy. And they all have different cycles that every 4 years you might see a provincial election, you see a federal election at different times. Then you see the First Nations elections. They all happen at different times. It creates so many levels of uncertainty that so many companies have chosen not to invest here. And even the ones that are locked in here with major investments, like I can use, for example, some of the ones for LNG up here where they put billions of dollars in. You see them contemplating whether or not it's even worth being here.
Yeah.
And they've got so much invested, and we've seen it now affect other sectors as well. And it's having major repercussions in so many different industries.
Yeah. So, one of the major reasons I brought you on, but I have a quick question first to ask you to explain. Because my viewers, before we get into forestry, because my show is not covered forestry and what's going on there, I don't fully understand it. That's why I have you on. Something happened. So I went over to Victoria to watch Making a Killing, the documentary. I was invited to watch it just before it was released. And I bumped into you there, not at the documentary necessarily, but outside we were talking. And then the next day, because I'd never done it, I went to legislature to watch in person from above,
Mhm.
and I was so confused because, as another weird miracle, that was the day that Tara Armstrong said we should make Freedom Convoy Day. If we're going to recognize everybody else and their hardships, we should recognize the Freedom Convoy. We were ousted from society and you couldn't get in anywhere if you didn't have a injection. So, but when the NDP voted yes, I looked at the person I was with and went, "What is happening here? I totally don't get it. You're explaining why the NDP has started to vote yes for Bill. Tell me what happened. You mentioned Von Palmer. So we're not confused at first reading if Ebby votes yes to something, that he's actually voting yes to it."
So, one BC came out with interesting strategy was that they were just going to bombard the legislature with a whole bunch of different bills. Some of them they knew probably wouldn't see the light of day. Others that they really picked topics that were far to the right, and it was interesting because we saw those topics pull the Conservative Party. It was either they came to the right and represented their base, or they ran out of the legislature, scared to even vote with it, whether or not they were whipped or not. And what happened was that the NDP, their reaction was to pretty much on first reading. So the only way that I can see a bill when it's brought forward is that on first reading, I will propose a bill. I get 2 minutes to talk to it. The House votes yay or nay. If it comes through, that bill publicly gets shared with everybody in the House, and it's known, the contents are known, and then it goes to second reading. There's a bunch of stuff that caught the NDP to the point where they just voted it down on first reading. So my practice is that on every first reading, I will vote yes. Even if I may not agree with it, I have to see the bill that's being brought forward to actually know what's in it to make an educated decision about whether or not I support it or whether or not my constituents will support it. Sometimes I don't always agree with what's said in their 2 minute speech. I think it's something that's in first reading, it should be supported, that it goes through, and it traditionally it is supported. Then it goes through so that it can be at second reading, so it can be discussed, so democracy can actually happen. Now they can shoot it down in second reading as well. That they've done that several times. They can also force it through and only allow so much time to speak to it on second reading. That happened with Anna Kindy's bill that she had for an amendment on the HPOA Act. Then they
Mm.
rushed that through. I didn't even get a chance to talk to it in second reading. But on first reading, they went through a whole bunch of them, pretty much just rejecting them on no on first reading, and made it so then there was looking like there was no democracy. And Von Palmer did an article where he was pretty much calling them out on this and saying like this shouldn't happen. Our
Mhm.
democracy really is just failing us. So when I brought forward DRIPA, I had the full support of the opposition to bring my bill forward to be able to discuss it, to at least talk about what's happening with title over title, the issues that are happening, whether or not certain amendments need to happen to it. These are all things that can be brought forward and dealt with, even at committee stage, where you can deal with different amendments. And it's
Okay.
got to a certain point where pretty much the NDP had to start recognizing that they had to vote yes on first reading. And what was unusual was that Tara Armstrong's bill on doing a holiday for the Freedom Convoy, that they voted that to go through. I voted yes on it as well. And it went through to second reading. Myself personally, I really thought that talking about DRIPA was a more important item when you look at the effect that it has on the province.
And NDP voted no on that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so in a nutshell, for those of you that aren't completely following, what this means is when somebody brings a bill forward at first reading, they're not even talking really about the contents yet. It's just, we need a bill to either amend or repeal or discuss this. So if Ebby says, okay, all he's saying is, we're willing to look at the bigger picture of what you want to present. It doesn't mean they're going to say yes after second reading. So when you see NDP starting to vote yes on things like Tara's Freedom Bill, that's because Von Palmer from the Vancouver Sun is like, NDP is just saying no to everything. So nobody can even discuss issues in second reading, get a full look at what does your bill entail, changes, repeals, whatever. Um, he just said, like, no discussion about anything. So in response to that, EB just starts saying yes to everything. So that means that Tara now has to spend what, like half an hour or 40 minutes talking about why the Freedom Convoy should have a day, right?
It depends on when it gets brought forward for second reading, but yeah, she will have to speak to it.
Mhm.
And whether or not they vote yes on other things, I guess we'll see. And
Right. And when people say people like you, or maybe some BC Conservatives or Dallas or whoever saying yes on first reading to NDP stuff, that would just mean that they want to see what they have to present because then you vote on it.
yeah,
So we could all get our underwear on a twist and a knot. For those of us that politically don't understand that it doesn't mean you're voting for it. This is important for us to know because I didn't know that, which means there's probably a lot of people that didn't know that. So it's really important that we understand that going forward, so we don't, all of a sudden hate our favorite guy when we don't understand he just wanted to see what was in it. And
and
that's
it
true democracy.
yeah, and it is democracy, and it to a certain degree, like with them having a majority, it seems like it's a charade that goes on in the House that we're talking to things and they're just going to ram it through anyways. But when they just rejected it first reading, they're really just showing that they're an authoritarian regime that doesn't give a crap about what people think or they don't want to talk about it. They just have their agenda and they're going to shove it down our throats.
Correct. That's David Eby. I know people who are complete lefties that would never vote conservative that can't stand Ebby and the arrogance of Ebby. So it's interesting. Okay, so forestry crisis, for those of us that don't understand, I think John Rustad even called it out. What is happening with the NDP destroying that business too?
I think it's been a work in the making with bad diplomacy with our main trading partner in the US, as well as going back to even when the Liberals were in. When it comes to bad forestry practices, the pine beetle kill, when it comes to forest fires and dealing with the timber that's left over that could be harvested, to now where our resource industry with it isn't appealing to companies to try and stay afloat anymore. And we're seeing companies like Canfor, West Fraser, Domtar, a lot of them are pulling out and taking their resources elsewhere. And it's not good because when, like, myself, I'm actually a millwright by trade as a mechanic, and I've worked in pulp mills, I've worked in sawmills, I've worked in OSB, I've worked in coal mines, I've worked in a lot of different industries fixing heavy equipment, and these aren't small facilities. They're not small investments. A huge amount of capital goes into them. A large amount goes into keeping them running. Forestry helped build our province. Same with the agriculture. When it comes to forestry, it's a renewable resource. If you treat it properly, like it really is just another type of farm that you're farming trees. If you treat it properly and manage it properly, it will be there for generations as well. And right now, we're not seeing that because the common sense of people that actually know about these industries aren't involved in politics anymore. It's becoming very clear with the mismanagement of these systems, like Ravi Palmer, that's the forestry minister. He's just a 25-year-old kid. He knows nothing about it, but he got put in charge of it. Meanwhile, in my region, we've got 4 million hectares that have burnt, that they haven't put out fires, that they really didn't actually invest major efforts into putting the fires out. They're just letting them burn. And now when you see that with First Nations, that they have a veto, that the NDP have given them veto over what happens with forestry, you create an atmosphere where it's just not reliable for companies to come in and invest. And if it's a big company like pulp and paper operation, these are all places that, when it comes to direct employment and even indirectly, that they've got over 1,000 people that they employ, that they have great jobs for. I was one of them, and it made it so that I could afford to buy a place of my own and have a family. Now we're in a scenario where we're in a resource rich country and province, and we've got people that have no clue what they're doing. They've created an atmosphere where investors don't see any point in investing at all because there's far too much risk in so many different ways. Um,
There's
they
just way too many cooks in the kitchen. How do you invest where you got this tribe and that tribe and this bureaucracy from the NDP and that and this and this? I mean, how would they actually expect us to survive like this? It's a
so
zoo. It's a zoo.
And the tough thing too is that, like, if you've got 204 First Nations and they've got veto, and there's no distinct boundaries of exactly what they have veto over, and there's overlapping issues and they're fighting amongst each other. All of these conversations happen behind closed doors with the current government. So most of the time we don't even know what's going on or why we don't have investors coming. But if a First Nations has choice or a veto over a super pad of LNG coming in that just has a really small footprint that they can make $1 billion off of, or the choice of having forestry exist in their region but has a way bigger footprint but only pays 50 million,
Mhm.
and they get a revenue share out of that in some way, or a partnership or possible ownership in a certain degree, they're going to pick the one that pays out the most. But the one that we need for British Columbians is our whole resource sector to be running and generating major revenues to pay down our debts and employ people.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, everybody wants their cake and eat it too. I mean, that's a simple way of putting it, I guess.
Yeah.
Come invest with us, but we have no idea what we're gonna do to you at the last second, and we don't care about you. You know? I don't
So
know.
I think we're in the stage right now where the NDP talks about harnessing resources, which is good. Like, that's normally a conservative or liberal practice to bring in those revenues. But they really have no clue about how to actually implement it. And the rural BC is built off of our resource sector. And when we start seeing the ripple effects of over the past 5 years, over 25 sawmills shut down, if there's about 1,000 people affected for each shutdown, well, you can see the clear numbers of how many people are losing their jobs, and that they're going to have to try and go elsewhere, or their kids now won't be able to find jobs, and they're going to go elsewhere as well. And it's I think we're seeing right now Alberta is flourishing, and tons of people are going there, and they know how to harness their resource sector.
Hmm. Exactly. My own kids are looking at the writing on the wall, and they're looking at BC as just a disaster. I might have to chase them around just to be near them, like to move once my last one graduates. So okay, do you think that David Eby is going to amend or repeal DRIPA? What do you think? It's okay if you end up being wrong, but what do you think?
I think he is going to cater to his agenda, and his agenda is DRIPA, and Canada, their agenda on that side is UNDRIP. That he'll do everything to appease First Nations. The amendments that he does do, I think they'll be superficial to try and appease the masses. He'll most likely try to do them to try and sway votes for if he's going to call an election. Now, that was one of the reasons why I kind of figured he's not going to do a snap election before February when we're sitting next, is because he would have to do something about amending DRIPA or fixing DRIPA before doing a snap election, because the having title upon title and another court case in Kamloops, I think he gets slaughtered in an election. That even with the disarray in the Conservative Party and them only having an interim leader, that I think the public will eat him alive on it. So I don't think he's going to call an election. You can have me on record. I think he's going to call an election in about 2 years' time, because then he can actually justify the cost of an election to the public. He can get things in order when it comes to pushing through more things that he wants. He does have a majority right now. He can push through what he wants, and the opposition is in disarray. There's 5 independents in place. The Conservative Party, even Aaron Gunn's choosing to not step into it, and he's saying that there's a lot of reasons on the federal level why he's not. And I think he got elected at the federal level. He should stay to that commitment, especially if there's a swing majority, if he did choose to leave.
I
Um,
agree. I agree.
that what's really worrisome for me is that it's one thing for me to become an independent, and I still hold all of my conservative values and my platform of what I ran on, and I left the party because of how bad the leadership was. But on a federal level, when you have conservatives that jump ship to get money and power on the liberal side to give them a majority, there is something major wrong there. Some people kind of hint like, well, you became an independent. That's just the same thing. No, the
No, it's not.
equivalent to me would be if I'd left the Conservative Party and joined the NDP. And it
You
was
know
right
why it's
there.
not? Exactly. You know why it's not? Is every bill that comes forward that the Conservative Party BC does, you can vote with it, and you become one unit, and you can vote against any that are bad with NDP. So
Yeah.
that's just not true, because when someone crosses to the Liberal Party, they're being whipped to do what Carney wants.
Yeah.
So, like, being an independent, you have hey, I agree with Rick Dignard. I wish that everybody went back to being independent,
Yeah.
because the corruption that happens with people not being allowed to say what they think, it just becomes this one party, then uniparty. I wish that we could change the way our brains think and just go back to each riding is independent. And so nobody can get fired from saying what their riding wants them to say, or for being a different voice. I mean, Dallas is a more I don't even wanna use the word extreme, but Dallas is a more honest voice of what's actually being said at the dinner table with a lot of families. And one more kudos to her documentary. I know I have people in my world. I have a huge family. I'm divorced, so there's just I just have and I have tons of cousins, and a ton. I'm from just a massive group of people. We are all completely different politically, and people that I never even thought would know about that documentary are now sharing it with people I know. I'm like, he shared that with you?
Hmm.
That person? There's two people in my world that are not political. They don't know anything but anything. Everybody's talking about what's happening to BC. And so that is at least we've got the ears of people. It's 5 years too late kind of, but I think that Ebby is in for a big disaster if he were to have an election right now, because I truly feel like the Conservative Party BC, as well as you as independent, as well as One BC, I think they can actually win an election just based on the disaster of DRIPA. Do you?
I think that if the Conservative Party gets a really strong conservative leader, I think they can do very well. I thought that they could do very well in the beginning, and I think that when John allowed it to become that big tent that he talked about, bringing all the liberals, I think he brought in the wrong ones, and they were the first ones to pretty much slit his throat and go after his leadership. I think that the biggest thing is that party. It's a conservative party. It's conservative platform. People want that major change to happen on the right. In BC, we're yearning for it. We've never truly had proper representation on the right. We've always pretty much had a liberal party of some kind or something similar, and by having a good conservative party, it allows for proper balance in our politics in British Columbia, and I think that's where that imbalance that we have right now. The Liberal Party and the NDP have allowed things to progress so far to the left that we're stuck in like a twilight zone right now that I don't even recognize some of the stuff that is getting approved that should never happen. And
Mhm.
here we are, we're seeing the repercussions that
Mhm.
give you an example that one bill got brought forward about just having flags out in front of the legislature, just the Canadian flag and the British BC flag.
No more lobby groups, special interest groups.
But the flag one, that only got 12 people to vote for it, which was disappointing that you'd think that that would be a pretty conservative bill to put your vote on to. ARPA that came into the legislature, they were just there as a group off to the side for people to meet with. They weren't even lobbying to change anything in the legislature at the time, and the NDP wanted to condemn them. And the first thing that the conservatives did was that they whipped their MLAs and they went running out of the house. The only ones that actually left a vote in favor of not condemning ARPA, which is a Christian organization, was myself, Dallas, and Tara. And
Well, you guys have so much respect. The difference that you guys have made in changing the perception of what's happening to this province, you guys don't get enough of a hug for that.
mm,
And so we see it, we really appreciate it. You are such a good guy. Everybody loves Jordan Kealy.
mm.
It's like, Jordan, Jordan, everybody loves Jordan Kealy. Where can we follow you? Facebook, Jordan Kealy, right? What about Twitter? What's your handle there?
I'm on X under Jordan Keel. I think when you search, you can find me in there.
Yeah.
Um, I've got a Facebook page, Jordan Keeley, Peace River North.
Okay.
Uh, that's my MLA page, and I've got just a little over 10,000 followers on there now.
Go follow him right now because, I can't keep bringing him on every week. And you do your own video updates, which are awesome because it keeps me up to date with what's going on. So everybody go follow Jordan. That's my son's name too. I like the name Jordan.
The other really big one too was that it didn't end up in a good way, but when it came to the ostrich farm, advocating for trying to help them and bring Katie to the legislature and getting her to talk to the Minister of Agriculture. And even though I'm a provincial MLA, the CFIA is under control federally. That got a lot of attention, and I was pleased to see and be able to help them get attention on that. The downside is that I've seen what the CFIA has done to farmers previously, and that iron fist that they rule with, and it was really disappointing to see the outcome for them and their family.
That was
And
Mao's China, man. What they
it
did to
was,
that a bunch of birds without bird flu that they refused to test. Mao's China. I mean, God, my audience has followed that closely.
yeah.
We have a lot of fixing to do in this province, Jordan, and I hope if there's an election again that you get reelected because we need the voices of you guys, and I really appreciate you so much. So, when and if there's an election somewhere down the road, I'd love to have you and Dallas on at the same time. Maybe a couple of conservatives and maybe Tara, a round table on how the heck we can all come together and defeat NDP. But, all the pushback has helped to stop vaccine mandates, has helped to stop a lot of. So let's say there's, you know, a certain amount of people in legislature pushing back. That does matter because
Mhm.
they look at what's popular. So whether we see that we're winning with bills or not, they care what's popular and they bend to what's popular. So the wind that you guys have pushed forward, as well as a lot of podcasters and stuff, has made a difference. My kids aren't being forced to take an endless amount of ejections because of people like you guys pushing back because it's not popular anymore. And so, you are making a difference. And I welcome you on anytime when there's more activity happening, changes to see what we can do to unite again and blow these Marxists out of the water.
I'm looking forward to it. I sit in a very unique riding when if they did do a snap election, I'm probably one of the few ridings where you could win as an independent,
Mm.
because of the conservative base that's up here. So that's one of the things that I've really capitalized on strengthening was making sure that I've got my own brand and that my constituents really know about why I left the Conservative Party and that I'm here for the people. So this is about trying to make our quality of life better. I don't want to have to see other people's family choose MAID because our medical system is so bad that they can't get the quality of care that they need. And I personally, everything that they throw at me to try and stop me, it just feeds that fuel inside of me to make me push that much harder right back.
Well, thank you so much for doing that for BC. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, talk soon.
Oh yeah, sounds good.
Go follow Jordan Kealy. He's awesome because he'll update you with what's going on in the legislature because I can't all the time because I don't just follow politics. But big hug to Jordan. Thank you so much for coming on. I will see you guys with an episode very soon. Very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you at the next one. Did you know if the banks do a bail-in, they can take the contents in your bank vault? But storing your gold and silver at home could be a huge security risk. Every day, our dollar is worth less and less. Inflation is stealing the only savings families have. Now more than ever, it's so important to hedge the savings you've worked so hard for. Banks have been failing all over the world, and social credit has all but arrived. But did you know you can do wholesale price vaulting and retail delivery from the most prestigious, reliable company in Canada? Did you also know if you decide to leave Canada, your gold and silver can be sent right to you after you arrive to your destination? The only company I personally use and trust are those awake guys at New World Precious Metals. Take control of your family's future. You can just click the link in my show description or type in the web address libertytalkcanada.ca/gold to get on their mailing list, attend their webinar, or book an appointment. Let them know Odessa sent you.
Restore Effects is the leader in professional paintless clear coat repair. Perfected over 2 decades, our product system surpasses traditional clear coat fixes to pave the future of vehicle reconditioning. Restore Effects permanently removes 99% of damage to your clear coat by replicating and restoring the original paint finish. Reset your vehicle's appearance or put your business fleet's best foot forward, all without repainting. Visit restoreeffects.com and find a center near you.